and welcome to an edition, there hasn't been one for a while, of The Spin. And tonight we are going to be talking about occupational therapy as a whole and also within the National Disability Insurance Scheme here in Australia. Before we start, these are some of our sponsors. We'll talk more about them later because they're wonderful and they're supporting us. But also, please, whatever you do, if you like what we're doing, subscribe, because we really need you to subscribe to YouTube, Instagram, follow us on Facebook. We seem to have lots of Facebook followers, but if you can follow us on YouTube, that'd be great. We need you to do what we're doing and to get the word out. So please don't forget to subscribe and also hit the bell so you know whenever we are on live. Well, today, as I said, we're talking about occupational therapy. And let me introduce Sarah Carew, who is an occupational therapist here on the Fraser Coast in Australia. G'day, Sarah.
Hi, Rod. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. It hasn't been easy to get an occupational therapist on, believe me. And to be completely transparent, you are my occupational therapist.
That is correct.
Which is cool. And we've been having lots of fun. In fact, folks, the only thing missing by doing this virtually, and because Sarah's at home, is we don't have the usual chocolate cake and cream, which is very sad.
I'm missing that, so we'll have to catch up with that next time.
We should have organised to have got one each, but anyway. Okay, let's get on with the serious stuff. Occupational therapy for a lot of people is just a word. They don't understand what it is, what it's for, why they need it, whether they need it. So, in simply, what is occupational therapy, please, Sarah?
Rod, occupational therapy is an allied health professional, and they use a holistic approach to work with either individuals or groups to work on optimizing health and well-being, really. And one of the approaches that we use is for people to participate in what we call occupations. So that can be anything from what people need to do in their home, looking after themselves, what they would like to do for work or volunteering, those types of things.
So I guess a lot of people see the word occupational and they think it's only about work. I mean, that's what I used to think. And it's not only about work. Like you said, it's really about life.
Absolutely, yeah. So the word occupation in occupational therapy is really talking about activities, if you like, or roles that people need to or want to participate in. It can be anything from a leisure activity, so knitting or painting, or like I said before, something that people need to do in their daily life, toileting, showering, cooking, all of those things. So that's what we're referring to when we talk about occupation.
Okay, so that kind of leads into the NDIS section of, or the National Disability Insurance Scheme, marriage with occupational therapy, because the National Disability Insurance Scheme is also about your whole life, making a better life, isn't it?
Absolutely. So there's a lot of alignment between the philosophies and the NDIS. So they're looking at some of those things that I was talking about before. So self-care, productivity, leisure. So there's definitely an alignment there.
See, within the NDIS, and I am looking at my notes as well, in a lot of cases you need to get approval and run things through an occupational therapist. So the NDIS seems to be relying on occupational therapy to help assist not only the client, but also them. Would that be correct, do you think?
Yeah, there's some truth to that. There's actually some big changes coming, Rod, that's probably discussed on another topic, because I'm not familiar with all of those. Just talk that the NDIS will be employing what they call an independent assessor. So like I said before, probably best for another topic, but certainly one of my roles as an occupational therapist is I receive a lot of referrals from support coordinators to complete what we call a functional occupational therapy assessment. So all of those things that I was talking about before, it's my role to assess a person and recommendations about what their needs might be on the NDIS and how they might be able to reach their NDIS goals.
See, there seems to be a lot of sweeping changes being mooted in the NDIS, and I really hope, from a participant's point of view, that it doesn't narrow our choices. Because one of the great things about the NDIS is having a choice, and because you're local, somebody from Simple Solutions actually recommended my support coordinator, who recommended you, and you all work together, and it makes for a very, very conducive arrangement when you all know each other and you can all work together. So you don't really want to break that sort of system up and have all of a sudden be arbitrarily given somebody. That would ruin some of the spirit of the NDIS, I think.
I understand your concerns. I think a lot of people share those too, Rod. But that's been one of the things that I've enjoyed. I'm new to the Fraser Coast. I've lived here for nearly a year. And that community spirit that you're talking about before is something I'm really enjoying being a part of. So working with lots of individuals and groups and support coordinators and all of the community programs that we have on the Fraser Coast is something that I'm really enjoying.
It's a great little community, and there are a lot of those communities around the nation and indeed around the world. And using local networks is really the best way to get good service, I think. But to move on from that, specifically in the NDIS, what sort of things do they need an OT to approve? Because OTs, or occupational therapies, have to approve a lot of purchases and services. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, so one of my other main roles, I suppose, as an OT is to complete what we call equipment trials and applications. So under the NDIS, there is an energy report, if you like, and that's my role to work with a client to discuss what equipment they may need to reach their NDIS goals. And we explore all of the equipment and submit an AT request or application to the NDIS, and they consider that application and may or approve it depending on their guidelines.
I mean, basically, I'm looking at a new wheelchair, for example. Now, I have to put that through an OT, which I think is a good thing. And how does something like that work? What's the process of doing that, and why does it need to go through an OT? Just to sort of let people know.
Yeah, sure. So again, it's a collaborative approach between an OT and a client or a family, and it really is about exploring those options, like I was talking about before, and matching an appropriate piece of equipment to a client based on the client's presentation. So maybe their physical presentation, their cognitive presentation, etc. And then it's my role, or the role of an OT, to justify from a clinical perspective why that piece of equipment may be suitable for the client.
Well, from my point of view, it's been a bit of an interesting process, because we sat down and we talked about the sorts of equipment I would need. Now, for example, for me, the four-wheel drive all-terrain wheelchair is very important for being able to get out and do programs like this when I'm interviewing people and get on the beach and show people things. So you said, well, look, I know who does that, and I know who does this other kind of wheelchair, and I think you might need one of each. Now, that's something I would never have thought of. But in looking at it that way, you are setting me up with the equipment I need to have, I use this word for fun, a normal existence, or an existence that is a lot easier. Now, you have more experience and knowledge than I do. I always think I know more than I do. But you have that network, and by going through you, I get access to that network along with you and the support coordinator, correct?
That's right. And it really is. I mean, I've enjoyed working with you. We work closely together and we share our ideas.
It's all the coke.
Uh,
Sorry, go
absolutely,
on.
over coffee. But certainly it is about, there might be a piece of equipment, Rod, that an NDIS participant didn't even know that existed in OT. And again, the OT matches a potential piece of equipment with the client and their goals. So really, it's a collaborative approach, and yeah, we like to introduce our clients to pieces of equipment that they may or may not be familiar with. But that equipment trial process that I was talking about before is really important. So we look at some equipment options, so different types of equipment. We trial them, and we make an informed decision about what may or may not work.
Well, for me, I've been always one of those sort of people that goes to the doctor and he says, and I'm quite ill, and he says, "How are you?" And I go, "I'm pretty good, thanks." I don't know why I'm at the doctor, I have no idea. But by talking with you, you've brought up things like a water kettle that is on a cradle, so now I won't have this horrendous risk that I always run of burning myself, which I have done in the past. So by working with an occupational therapist, you can point out things that really are help to assist in my life, I guess. With that in mind, who makes the decision? If you say, yes, Rod, you need this piece of equipment, how much say do you have with the NDIS in whether I get it or not, I guess?
Yeah, so it's my role to use my clinical judgment and my experience to complete those applications that I was talking about before. Not every piece of equipment, I should say, needs an application. There's different categories under the NDIS in terms of the type of equipment that might need. But say we're talking about the wheelchair, yeah, it's definitely my role to make some recommendations in a report, demonstrate to the NDIS why, in my experience, I feel it's reasonable and necessary, and they're the key words in the NDIS, reasonable and necessary. And the NDIS have guidelines that they use to, I suppose, consider the applications that are in front of them. And they get back to the occupational therapist and the participant and let them know either, yes, it has been approved, or no, it hasn't because it hasn't met these guidelines. And they're the reasonable and necessary guidelines.
And generally, as long as it fits those reasonable and necessary, do they usually take your recommendations? Usually?
I've found that a lot of my applications, to be honest, have been successful. I've worked in the NDI space for a long time, and yeah, my applications are generally successful, and they make a real difference to the participants, and that's the whole idea of it.
Well, I really hope that her recommendations for me are accepted because I'm really excited about the new life that Sarah
Yeah.
is designing with me. Sarah, I'm in a wheelchair, so I've got a particular type of disability, if you will. OTs do the whole range of disabilities, like hearing impaired, visual impaired. I mean, what sort of range of disabilities are you expected to cater for, or are there specialist occupational therapists, or what?
Oh, that's a good question. It's so broad, Rod. Some OTs choose to specialize in certain fields. So prior to me moving to the Fraser Coast, I was specializing in brain injury. So that was my space. Some OTs are very broad, and they'll help a range of participants with a variety of conditions. But realistically, if we're talking about from an NDIS perspective, many different people with a variety of disabilities, including psychological disabilities, physical, etc. If they have access to the NDIS, then OTs definitely have the, I suppose, opportunity to work with a lot of different people.
That's an awfully large range and quite a lot of responsibility to take on in many ways. There's a question I've just thought of. How long does it take to become an occupational therapist?
It's a 4-year degree, a university degree.
Fair enough. Okay, I hadn't ever thought of it. Um, One of the things I'm just looking through here, um, I would imagine because of the NDIS, there would be more work and more need for occupational therapists. As the NDIS has grown, so has the need and the call for occupational therapists. Would that be correct?
That's definitely my experience, for sure. And moving to the Fraser Coast, there's a lot of long waiting lists here that I wasn't aware of when I first moved into this area. So that's unfortunate, to be honest, that there's a lot of people on the Fraser Coast that are waiting a really long time to see an OT.
But it also brings up a concern for me because with this influx of new OTs, some of them wouldn't have a lot of experience. Some of them maybe, this is a terrible thing to say, but some of them might be, how will I put this politically correctly? Some occupational therapists are in there, and more than 50% of the reason they're in there is to help people. Some are in there because it's just a financial decision to do that for an occupation, if you like. How do you know? What can you do to know that you're getting a good occupational therapist? Have you got any guidelines or ideas for that other than call you?
Thanks, Rod. Yeah, that's a really good question. I suppose you could be asking the OT what level of experience they have. Going back to your previous question, which was a great question about do OTs specialize in certain areas, you could be certainly asking that. So, I'm a participant with this type of presentation. Are you familiar with that? Have you had experience in this space? That could be a question to ask as well. Yeah, but in terms of working with a good OT, I think a lot of it is about who you build rapport with as well. Just from that natural type of
Sort of an empathy, wouldn't it be? You'd need someone with empathy and someone with the right motivation. And some of those might not have a lot of experience. So, what do you think?
yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
I was going to say probably one of the best things people could do is just spend an hour talking to them and seeing what they know and just asking questions and sort of interview their occupational therapist in a gentle way without even making it that formal. Would that be right?
Absolutely. I get asked occasionally to meet families for what we would call a meet and greet. So it's as simple as let's have a coffee and have a chat and see if there is that connection there and the families are wanting to continue with a certain OT. And I think that's really important because, Rod, we're invited into people's homes where we often are asking them a variety of personal questions. When you're working with an OT with some of these processes that we've been talking about. So, for example, a prescription for a pack sometimes. So, you need to make sure that you're working with the right OT for you over probably an extended time. But definitely asking those questions about do you have experience in this space? What's your experience in the NDIS space? Certain businesses will have the way that they support their new staff. I
And
think
if
you
you're
were
a
alluding.
parent, I guess watch how they react with your child and make sure that they include the child and don't talk down to them and things like that,
Yeah,
so that the children can be taught a sense of self-worth from the very beginning. I think is important.
yeah.
We're probably getting a bit off topic, but it's kind of fun. Just on that, do you think it's a frustrating or a rewarding career?
Oh, definitely rewarding. I mean, every job has its ups and downs, and there's challenges as an OT, as there would be in a lot of industries. But I love my role, and a lot of the OTs that I taught to really enjoy their roles as well. And it's very rewarding. It's wonderful. And the NDIs provide a lot of opportunities for people to receive treatment that maybe they didn't receive before, pieces of equipment like what we've been talking about, you with your dream of the X8 all-terrain powered chair, those types of things, when they are approved and they're delivered and you see the smile on your client's face, that's what makes me
I
tick.
must say I can't wait, but I've also been really looked after by Pride in the past, and you told me I could still use them for other areas of my life because they don't do a full. But I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah, because
Recommend both. Yeah.
yeah. So there's just so many questions that I have, but without mentioning names or places, is it possible, and if not, just say you can't, to tell us a story of something that you've seen happen that has just brought a lot of joy, something you've been part of with a client that has really brought some joy to your face or to your life? Can you think of one?
Oh, so many. Definitely going back to what pieces of equipment that people have not been able to access before. So it could be a new wheelchair, it could be a vehicle in terms of the modification. It could be a new bathroom that people now feel safe in to shower. One of my passionate areas is around equine therapy, so I enjoy working with children and adults with animals. And
That's why
now
you
there's
like
the
my dog.
opportunity. I love your dog. I think we've got a lot in common in that space as well. Yeah, so there's so many, Rod, honestly, and I mean it when I say that some of these changes are life changing for people. Absolutely.
Let me see if I can introduce my dog to people for a minute. Rocky, come here. I'm training Rocky to be an assistance dog. Rocky, come. You can see how obedient he is. He's asleep. Rocky, come here, quick. Come on. He's been taught to stay away when I'm interviewing. Come around here, quick. Come on, up, up. Can you? There you go. There you go, Rocky.
That's the other disadvantage of doing this virtually is I don't get a cuddle.
Don't get a fat from Rocky. Ah, that's funny. But look, be honest. One last question in regard to that last one, because I know I would be. I would find myself in tears all the time. Does it happen to you when good things happen? When you see somebody with a new piece of equipment or changing their life, have you ever just had a little bit of a quiet tear?
I'm going to have to admit to that. Yes,
I know I have too, just watching it
I
from
have.
afar.
Yeah, I absolutely have, and that's okay. That means that we do care. Yeah, I've had a few little tears. Most of them happy tears. So
That's the best thing. Now, just one other question before we finish. I don't want to concentrate on COVID-19 because this will be around for a while. This interview, and perhaps and hopefully, when people are watching it, the COVID situation will have passed. But for right now, it's difficult in some ways because you can't do everything face to face. So there's a lot of Zooming and a lot of virtual meetings, but some things just have to be face to face, don't they? So how are you balancing that?
I'm lucky, Rod, because I used some teleconference and telehealth platforms in my previous role prior to COVID-19. So I felt relatively comfortable with the changes. Other people, not so much, and that's okay. It was a big change for a lot of us. But I think it's a wonderful opportunity, really, to even use telehealth a little more, even when things settle down with COVID-19. Face-to-face consultations absolutely have their place, and that's one of my favorite things about my job. But I think using telehealth is also really important for a number of reasons.
There would even be a group of people maybe a small subset of people that in the beginning would possibly be even more comfortable with the virtual communication. Maybe they're embarrassed, or maybe they're a little bit awkward, and they need to get to know you first before
Yeah,
they
like I
invite you
said
into their
before.
home.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And for people that live rurally, or that, like I
Of
said
course.
before, if there's a waiting list for OTs, there might be access to an OT virtually, more quickly than there is for face to face. So definitely something to explore more.
Okay. Well, Sarah, hopefully we can get you back again sometime. Don't go away, because I'm going to have a chat to you when we finish. So just hang five for a sec. Folks,
No
that's Sarah
problem.
Carew, my occupational therapist, explaining a lot of what an occupational therapist is and what their role is in the NDIS. And the NDIS has been a wonderful thing, as I've said. Now, let me just tell you about the people who've helped support us. If you can whack them up, Carl. There's, of course, Simple Solutions here in Harvey Bay, who are an NDIS trainer and provider and all that sort of thing. We've got Hello World Travel and Hello World in general, who are supporting our fully accessible tours through Accessible Globe. Totally Mobile in Harvey Bay, who have a huge range of different scooters and health products and so on, and they're happy to get involved and help you as well. IOMI, you don't know about them, but you will soon. They are producing smart home packages that can be monitored, so they can help you with that and make sure everything runs very, very well. So please don't forget to support our supporters, and also don't forget to subscribe, if you don't mind, to all our places. And until then, we'll see you next time on The Spin.